With age comes the understanding that the true support in life isn't always what we've grown accustomed to relying on. Have you noticed how, over time, the true essence of people becomes increasingly evident, like a design emerging on ancient parchment? Many of us tend to believe that family will be an unwavering support, children will be grateful for all the sacrifices, and old age will greet us surrounded by warmth and loving smiles. However, as the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer cautioned, we shouldn't indulge in excessive illusions, for reality often proves to be much harsher. Life can deliver blows harder than we expect. Suddenly, loneliness can grip with icy embraces, and one feels more abandoned than ever before. Children build their own lives, friends disappear like shadows in the fog, and society shows indifference. What remains in such a situation? Schopenhauer argued that the wisdom of mature age lies not in desperately clinging to others, but in creating one's own fortress based on independence and self-esteem. Further on, 7 key principles will be revealed that will help keep your head held high and strengthen your mental fortitude in your mature years, based on Schopenhauer's harsh but honest reflections. The philosopher asserted that the true wisdom of old age lies not in dependence on others, but in strengthening those pillars that ensure autonomy and preservation of dignity. We will further examine these 7 crucial pillars for a fulfilling and independent life after 60, which will allow you to maintain inner strength and self-confidence despite any life circumstances. The first and key pillar in life, awareness of the danger of family illusions. A common misconception lies in the naive belief that family will become an impregnable fortress in old age. Public opinion persistently instills that family ties are an unshakable support, but Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher known for his critical view of human nature, warned against self-deception. Family relationships are often based not on unconditional love, but on ingrained childhood notions of duty and necessity. In younger years, parents appear as omnipotent protectors and the center of the universe. However, time is relentless, and life priorities shift. Career, own families, and personal problems come to the forefront. The feeling of love may persist, but elderly parents cease to be the center of attention. In old age, there arises an expectation of constant care and support, while children may be far away, absorbed in their own affairs. Schopenhauer directly stated the futility of hoping that children will return all the care invested in them in the past. The harsh reality is that attachments can weaken under the influence of distance, differing interests, and the natural course of life. At the twilight of days comes the bitter realization that those who placed all their hopes on family suddenly find themselves alone, experiencing confusion and resentment. Are the prospects really so bleak? However, Schopenhauer not only warned, but also instructed. He tirelessly repeated that to avoid being consumed by disappointment, it is necessary to face reality and prepare for it in advance. Maturity persistently signals not to build your well-being on the foundation of other people. Although people may fuss around the elderly, showing care, life experience often testifies otherwise. Even with love present, children may live far away, grandchildren may barely recognize you, and participation in family affairs becomes increasingly rare. What remains to be done if the family does not meet expectations and does not become the support that was dreamed of? It's not about turning away from everyone and voluntarily condemning oneself to loneliness. Rather, it is proposed to rethink the situation, realizing that the role of family in old age may differ from what was expected. Instead of desperately clinging to the illusion that children and grandchildren will become the main support and source of joy, it is worth strengthening other aspects of life that bring satisfaction and maintain an interest in life regardless of those around you. Don't expect children to return love as if paying off a debt on a schedule. Many parents dedicate their entire lives to their children, hoping for gratitude or return, but Schopenhauer was adamant. Hoping for something from others means digging your own pit of disappointments. It is better to give children love selflessly, without expecting anything in return, and then live for yourself, doing what brings joy and satisfaction. Are you ready to give up these expectations and reconsider your priorities? Imagine that family ties sometimes resemble a dilapidated bridge subjected to the trials of time. You shouldn't expect that children or grandchildren will always be around as often as you would like, because their life paths and priorities change. However, this does not mean that love has faded. It simply demonstrates a redistribution of life forces. Instead of succumbing to resentment, it is wiser to accept this change as a given. Those who genuinely wish to be close will inevitably find a way to show their affection. It is with such people that one should build strong and sincere relationships without clinging to illusions. Friendship outside the family circle is what can become a real support. Many people mistakenly limit their world to the confines of their family and then wonder why it becomes increasingly cramped and stifling. In contrast, one can choose a different path. Invest in strong friendships, attend meetings and events where you can interact with like-minded people. Friends are the new family that everyone chooses for themselves, and with them, there's no need to wonder if they will be there in times of trouble. One German thinker argued that emotional maturity lies in the ability to see the world as it truly is, not as the imagination paints it. Old age does not necessarily have to be a period of bitter disappointments and loneliness. On the contrary, it can become a time of freedom and self-realization if a person is willing to accept the truth and build a life based on their own strengths and resources. What if children, for some reason, are unable to visit? In that case, having a strong circle of friends and interests will become a reliable support and allow you to maintain an active and fulfilling life. The second pillar of wisdom lies in recognizing the danger lurking in excessive expectations of human relationships. Simply put, the root of many problems in relationships lies in the deep chasm that separates our idealized notions of how things should be and harsh reality. The higher the bar of expectations, the more painful the fall, and Arthur Schopenhauer, a perceptive philosopher, understood this pattern like no other. He declared, "Misfortune is nothing more than the collapse of our castles in the air against the rocks of reality." The logical question arises, is it worth building these fragile structures at all? Often, we create in our imagination a kind of code of conduct for others, prescribing certain actions for them, expressing gratitude, showing appreciation, and unfailing presence nearby. In youth, such disappointments are easier to bear, since work, friendships, and personal hobbies serve as a reliable distraction. However, with the onset of maturity, many people narrow their range of interests to the family hearth, placing special hopes on children and grandchildren. And this is where the danger lies. It turns out that the younger generation has its own priorities and concerns. The main mistake is ignoring the relentless passage of time. Having crossed the 60-year mark, many bitterly realize that children no longer revolve around them like planets around the sun. They have their own homes, their own families, their own professional ambitions. This does not mean that love has faded. It is simply that the focus of their attention is directed towards the future, not the past. But if a person stubbornly waits for daily calls and hours-long gatherings, disappointment and resentment will inevitably befall them. The philosophy of expectation is ephemeral and transient. Instead of making exorbitant demands, it is better to let go of the situation and allow events to unfold in their own way. The fewer expectations we place on others, the less often we experience feelings of abandonment and uselessness. Everyone has their own life path, and this is perfectly normal. Instead of grumbling at fate, one should take the reins of one's own life into one's own hands and build it according to one's own discretion, filling it with joy and meaning. Are you ready to give up the burden of expectations and find true freedom? The third pillar of wisdom in mature age is solitude, presented not as a sentence, but as a valuable ally. Often, loneliness is portrayed as one of the darkest fears that haunt older people. But is it so terrible in its essence? The great Arthur Schopenhauer saw in solitude not a burden, but a gift available to those who have learned to recognize its true value. The philosopher argued that only those who have found harmony with themselves are able to achieve true peace of mind. Old age should not cause trepidation before loneliness, but rather be perceived as a long-awaited liberation. In youth, society persistently instills in us the idea of the need to be constantly surrounded by people. We are taught that happiness lies in social connections, in belonging to a group, in the approval of others. However, with the passage of time comes the understanding that many of these interactions lack depth, dictated only by the desire for external evaluation. Schopenhauer, however, argued that true freedom is found only by those who do not depend on the opinions and presence of others. It is widely believed that a life filled with people is fulfilling, but it is worth remembering that quantity does not always translate into quality. Life paths diverge, and inevitably there comes a moment when someone leaves us. At first glance, this may seem sad, but there is a liberating side to it as well. In today's world, where social interactions often seem mandatory, festive events and meetings turn into formalities, necessary only to maintain appearances. Over time, the realization dawns that many of these contacts do not bring genuine joy and satisfaction. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, argued that outstanding minds are doomed to solitude because their depth and insight prevent them from finding common ground with the superficial majority. People who fear loneliness often mistakenly believe that loneliness is equivalent to abandonment. However, it is important to understand that these are two completely different states. Loneliness can be a conscious choice, a voluntary withdrawal from the outside world, while abandonment arises when a person places their happiness and well-being solely on other people. As people age, many face feelings of loneliness, realizing that they no longer occupy a central place in their children's lives, that their circle of friends is shrinking, and that social contacts are becoming increasingly rare. Instead of perceiving this as a tragedy and a loss, Schopenhauer encourages us to see this as an opportunity for self-discovery and strengthening the inner world. Loneliness, according to the philosopher, can become a time for reflection, introspection, and spiritual growth. The ability to find satisfaction in one's own company is the key to ensuring that a person never experiences true loneliness. Arthur Schopenhauer, a profound thinker, asserted that the measure of intelligence is the ability to appreciate time spent alone with oneself. Instead of seeing a gaping void in solitude, wise people perceive it as a priceless opportunity for self-discovery and spiritual growth. A leisurely walk in the park, watching a captivating movie, or simply enjoying aromatic coffee in the silence of one's own home. All this can become a source of deep inner peace. Inner balance is achieved when we stop searching for external entertainment and distractions. It is necessary to let go of the obsessive need for social approval, because the constant pursuit of recognition and acceptance is one of the main causes of human unhappiness. Mature years offer a unique opportunity to break free from the shackles of other people's expectations and begin to live in accordance with one's inner truth, ceasing to look back at the opinions of others and catering only to one's own needs. Schopenhauer teaches us that loneliness is not something to be feared, but a necessary stage on the path to achieving true inner peace for those who strive for self-realization. Old age, contrary to popular belief, can become the most liberating period in life if we are willing to accept it with wisdom and dignity. Whoever learns to feel comfortable in solitude will never become a hostage to the impermanence and changeability of the external world. Ultimately, the best company a person can have is themselves, because they will never betray or abandon themselves. The fourth pillar of well-being is wealth, acting as a reliable shield. Money is not just colorful bills, it is much more than that. Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher distinguished by a realistic view of human nature, argued that wealth is not a source of unlimited happiness, but rather a tool to protect against life's adversities. The philosopher was convinced that money in itself is not capable of bringing joy, but it can protect against many problems, especially in old age. In their youth, many naively believe that old age will be surrounded by the care and attention of loved ones. However, life is fleeting, and without financial independence, a person risks becoming a hostage to circumstances. It is a common belief that children will always be there and provide the necessary support, but reality often turns out to be different. Not everyone is willing to take on the burden of caring for elderly parents. Some offer support out of genuine love, while others begin to see their parents as a burden or a source of profit. There are frequent cases when unscrupulous relatives empty their parents' accounts or resort to various tricks for personal gain. In other words, the lack of one's own funds deprives a person of the opportunity to independently make decisions regarding their place of residence, nutrition, and necessary care. Everything ends up in the hands of other people. That is why the realization that true protection in old age is not hope for loved ones, but financial independence, is key. With age, health deteriorates, expenses increase, and society often treats elderly people as expendable. Without sufficient means of subsistence, a person becomes defenseless in the face of these challenges. In today's world, simply buying bread is commonplace, while creating reliable protection from humiliation and financial instability, like a soft safety net, is seen as a luxury. However, in the author's opinion, it is more of a vital necessity, without which human dignity is severely tested. How can you ensure this protection for yourself? The author shares his experience, noting that he began planning his retirement well in advance to protect himself from possible financial difficulties in the future. He recommends consulting with specialists to assess your capabilities and create a plan to ensure a calm and dignified life in retirement. However, there is also a certain trap, the natural desire to help your children or grandchildren in difficult times. The author notes that many elderly people, succumbing to this impulse, give away all their savings and then find themselves in difficult circumstances. He adheres to the principle of reasonable assistance, providing support to loved ones, but only if it does not harm his own financial situation and is accompanied by clear agreements. To strengthen his financial base, the author suggests various strategies: renting out real estate, receiving interest from deposits, or even starting a small business of his own. The main goal is to ensure that you can breathe freely in the last years of your life without worrying about every penny. In this context, Schopenhauer's wise saying comes to mind: "With money, you are your own master." Money becomes a reliable ally in the fight against dependence and helplessness. The author emphasizes that wealth is necessary not to demonstrate status, but to ensure personal safety and independence. Previously, the author believed that the love of children would be his support in old age, but now he realizes that respect comes only when a person retains his independence and ability to make decisions independently. Those who take care of their future in advance gain freedom and peace of mind. And what could be more valuable than the opportunity in old age to determine your own life without depending on other people's decisions and circumstances? The fifth pillar supporting mortal existence is vanity and the false attractiveness of appearance. What about appearance, this eternal trap of youth? In his younger years, the author was delighted with flawless faces and rich colors, but with the advent of maturity, time turned into a ruthless adversary that everyone tries to banish. Schopenhauer, the unsurpassed master of exposing illusions, warned, "Chasing fleeting beauty is a senseless waste of life energy." He argued that youth shines only with its external shell, while in maturity, wisdom becomes the main advantage. The author observes how many desperately try to turn back time, naively believing that a few miraculous creams or injections can restore lost freshness. But this is a profound delusion, for old age is not a burden, but a unique opportunity. People spend precious years waging a fruitless struggle with wrinkles, as if the absence of such would allow them to deceive fate itself. However, the author has long realized an immutable truth. Nothing can stop the relentless passage of time, and accepting this fact is not a manifestation of weakness, but a sign of strength of mind. From childhood, society imposes the idea that youth is the pinnacle of human existence. Television screens, glossy magazines, everywhere there are young bodies, shining hair and faces untouched by the seal of time. Old age, on the other hand, is presented as a kind of fall, something shameful that should be hidden from prying eyes. But Schopenhauer rightly called such a worldview a trap, and the author fully shares his point of view. There is nothing reprehensible in taking care of yourself, but the mad desire to preserve a youthful appearance is a dead end. People mindlessly spend huge sums of money on surgical interventions and cosmetics that promise eternal youth. The author, observing this senseless hype, wonders, why? After all, in the end, all these tricks are only a temporary mask that will sooner or later be dropped. Philosophical reflections reveal the truth. True beauty lies not in the reflection of a mirror surface, but in the treasure trove of the inner world, which a person carefully cultivates throughout his life. A senseless pursuit of fleeting youth, like a ruthless vampire, sucks life forces, depriving the opportunity to enjoy the present moment. Each era of life, like a skillfully painted picture, has its own unique charm, and maturity, marked by the seal of time, contains a special depth. The fight against inevitable aging is tantamount to a missed opportunity to enjoy the best gifts of life. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German irrationalist philosopher, tirelessly repeated that vanity is a heavy weight that relentlessly pulls a person down into the abyss of disappointment. Why indulge in fruitless regrets about the past when one can wholeheartedly rejoice in what has come? True youth is manifested not in flawless skin or raven-black hair, but in a sincere curiosity about the world around us, in a constant pursuit of new knowledge, and in the ability to live easily and naturally without needing constant confirmation of one's own importance. Acceptance of the inevitable passage of time grants long-awaited freedom, and enduring beauty, unaffected by the destructive influence of time, lies in an unwavering inner core. Are you finally ready to stop languishing in the captivity of mirror reflections? Wisdom, like a sixth pillar, proclaims an immutable truth. It is true wealth. However, there is something that surpasses external attractiveness in value. Wisdom, which over the years turns into a priceless treasure. While many spend their lives chasing elusive money and dubious honors, Schopenhauer's reflections allow us to realize that in old age it is not bulging wallets that warm the soul, but the invaluable baggage of knowledge and experience accumulated over many years. One sage deeply believed that true wealth lies not in the glitter of gold coins or fleeting fame, but in a treasury of the mind filled with invaluable experience and deep knowledge. In his youth, driven by ambition, he strived for career heights and public recognition, considering this the main thing in life. However, over time he realized that material goods and social status can be lost in an instant, while life lessons and wisdom remain unshakable. Unfortunately, many elderly people stop learning, as if the world has lost its appeal with their last working day. Such inaction has a detrimental effect not only on physical health, but also on mental clarity. After retiring, he noticed that without new intellectual challenges, the mind begins to become lazy. The absence of fresh ideas leads to apathy and boredom. Schopenhauer argued that knowledge is an immense wealth that cannot be taken away. Money can be stolen, social standing lost, but wisdom only grows stronger if it is constantly nurtured. Old age is a time for deep reflection and exploration of the world. Every day he discovers something new, reads, reflects, learns, feeling his spirit remain alive despite physical ailments. The German philosopher taught that a person's value is not determined by the size of their bank account, but by the depth of their understanding of life. Isn't it wonderful to maintain a youthful mind when the body is asking for rest? He is convinced that he will leave behind not material possessions, but thoughts that he can share with others. Arthur Schopenhauer, the great thinker, once remarked that the only treasure that accompanies a person to the very end of their days is their wisdom. And indeed, why stop on the path of knowledge when each new day can bring new discoveries and keep the mind in excellent shape? The author of these lines, having reached the seventh principle, discovered for himself the amazing value of silence, which Schopenhauer, this insightful philosopher, perceived not as emptiness, but as a manifestation of strength and wisdom. The sage argued that as life goes on, one begins to value more and more the moments when the world around freezes. Silence becomes a kind of refuge for smart people, while for those who cannot stop, it turns into a real nightmare. In youth, it seemed necessary to constantly prove one's case, to engage in disputes, to respond to attacks. But over the years came the understanding of how many words were spoken in vain, how much energy was spent on those who were not going to listen. Now it is clear to the author that silence is not a manifestation of weakness, but a reliable shield that protects peace and does not allow emotions to get out of control. Often in old age, quarrels arise over trifles, over the desire to insist on one's own way. B. In family disagreements, disputes with children or their spouses, or fruitless conversations about politics. And then the question arises, why? After all, no one wants to give in such disputes. Sometimes the most reasonable solution is to refrain from words and direct energy to more significant goals. Schopenhauer, the great thinker, called the wise to contemplation and silence. The author, following this principle, reduced his speech activity, increased the time spent listening, and discovered that the world opened up before him in a completely new light. There is no need to plunge into chaos and noise when silence has the ability to put everything in its place. Perhaps someone still believes in the absolute power of words, but how effective is it to use silence? The author has learned to ignore meaningless conversations, understanding that not every statement deserves a response. While some people engage in arguments over trivial matters, he prefers to nod and move on, seeing this not as egoism, but as a way to conserve energy for more important things. Listening turns out to be much more beneficial than speaking. The philosopher was right. A silent observer sees far more. The author began to notice how people reveal their true intentions and thoughts in conversations simply by giving them the opportunity to speak. Sometimes it is enough to sit in silence, reflect, and the solution comes by itself, without a single word. External silence breeds inner peace. The author makes time for calming activities, reading, nature walks, listening to the rustling of leaves. These moments help to clear the mind and create a kind of armor against the negative influence of other people's complaints and noise. Schopenhauer argued that in a world full of shouting, the true master is the one who knows how to be silent. For the author, old age is not the sunset of life, but an opportunity to deepen wisdom. He realized that true value lies not in material possessions, not in the reflection in the mirror, not in the praise of others, but in the richness of the inner world. This philosopher is able to resolve any difficulties. Contrary to popular belief, maturity is not afraid of oblivion. Freedom lies in giving up expectations of miracles from others. Isn't this where true power lies? The author of the narrative has completed the consideration of the 7 pillars proposed by Schopenhauer, designed to transform old age from a burden into a source of strength. He went through the thorns of awareness, stopped nurturing illusions about family, strengthened his financial position, and enriched himself with wisdom that allows him to distinguish the true from the false. Ensuring one's own well-being is not a manifestation of egoism, but a vital need to breathe fully when the burden of years begins to weigh on the shoulders. Old age is not the final chord of life, but its new turn, provided one is ready to face reality. Each of these pillars is like a brick in the foundation that keeps a person afloat. The author realized that independence, deep knowledge, and inner peace are not a luxury, but a reliable shield that protects against the chaos of the surrounding world.